So like if I like do this, knock the water bottle over, it was inevitable that I was knocking that water bottle over because I had thought about it, and I pushed it over, and because I pushed it, it fell because gravity, whatever. Oh crap! I guessed. Can you bleep that?
I will.
Thank you. Okay.
All right, everyone. Welcome to episode 7 of Discourse Debriefs. Hopefully the world's not on fire yet. We're a day out of the election, and we're still standing, so it's a bit gloomy, but hey, so it goes.
Amen.
Yeah. This is Peyton's week for the topic. Just before we get started, a couple announcements. Yesterday for us, Tuesday for you guys, a few of us were in Florida on a UNF campus. They were doing a panel on what gets college students to vote. That was live streamed and is on our YouTube page, so I encourage you to go check that out if that sounds interesting to you. Me and Peyton will be part of a debate here on campus on December 3rd, I believe at 6:30 in the Kiva room?
Yes.
Is that right? Kiva room?
Student Union.
Student Union, yep. We'll be talking about student protesting, and we'll see if we have some new material to go over by the time
December comes around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We will see. Yeah, that's about all we've got. Not much really going on for the rest of the semester other than the debate. So we're very excited to get into the spring. I know we've got a lot of stuff planned. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And with that, I'm about done. So Peyton, what are we doing today?
Well, I did some thinking, long and hard.
That's dangerous.
I know, thinking's a very dangerous thing. But did some thinking, and I imagine you're a very politically oriented person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a very philosophically oriented person, and I was thinking of, where do these two things come together?
Okay.
And I came up with a topic, and it's pretty broad. I have some roads I want to go down, but the broad topic is law and morality.
Okay.
So there's two fundamentally different things going on there, right? But they tend to, I think, and I want to ask you about this, influence each other. So just broadly, how do you feel, be it either you personally or in the actual world we live in, the relationship between laws, legislation, criminality relates to morality?
Okay. I guess just like kind of on the surface, like legislation and maybe not necessarily law, but definitely legislation has become a lot more politically oriented. It's what can we do that makes us look better rather than what actually helps the country. We'll see if we get more of that. But I guess that's kind of the surface level take I have on the legislative part. Laws are kind of interesting because they're separate in a way. I mean, yeah, like if you've ever seen like those videos of like weird laws that exist, like you can't own a duck in like Arkansas or something like that.
Yes.
Like just random facts that happen to be laws for whatever reason. I guess like I think they're meant to kind of align with what we perceive as what is moral. I mean, like killing people is probably not moral unless it's for a very good reason, obviously. I guess I'll rephrase and say murdering people is probably not moral. So that's why we have laws against that. And there's other things that tie into that. But I guess like kind of as we get into the weeds, that sort of relationship between what is legal and what is moral, you get into a gray area. I know like for a lot of people, abortion is a big one in that regard. So yeah, I guess that's just kind of my immediate thought.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good, albeit you did admit, like broad summary, right? We're starting out this very, very deep, complicated topic. But yeah, I think I broadly agree with that. I guess just to get a gauge of where your head is as we go into this kind of conversation, for you personally, in a vacuum, assuming you didn't have to account for, societal norms, the legislative process, what would for you personally be the perfect relationship between law and morality?
Well, ideally in a society we don't need laws at all. I mean,
true.
But at the same time, human nature kind of demands that we do. So I don't know. That's kind of I can go back and forth on that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, yeah, if I don't remember what the quote is, but like if men were angels, you wouldn't need a government.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, ideally, we wouldn't need some kind of executive ruling class that keeps us in order. But unfortunately, we are human. We have brains. We are chaotic beings. So that demands some sort of government, I suppose.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
And then I guess I'll ask one more kind of broad question before I go into the specific aspects of law and morality on their own. How do I want to put this? Do you think that our morality comes from laws, or that our laws are a reflection of morality? And of course, it's going to be kind of a mix of both. But do you have any intuition as to which one you think influences the other more?
I guess for me personally, my morals probably come from the law, but like I've also never really experimented with what my own morals are really. Like I haven't taken any kind of philosophy classes or anything like that. I've never really critically thought about, why I think the things that are bad are actually bad.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, it's probably law dictates morality. And I would probably argue that's probably been the case for most of human history. I mean, like, when the first laws were drafted, so like I know like I think it's like Hammurabi's Code is often referred to as like the first really like notable legal, I don't want to say document because it was on like a stone tablet or whatever, but so and that was to it's been a while.
You're good.
But like it wasn't drawn up with like fairness in mind. It was very, okay, what can we do to keep the peasants in line, whatever that would mean at the time. So I would probably be on the side that laws have dictated morality for a good portion of our history.
And do you think it should, or I'll rephrase this, what about on the individual level? So I think on a societal level, that's probably true to an important extent. But what about on the personal individual level?
I mean, like I talked about myself, I think probably for most people, it like depends on a lot of things. Like if you're a religious person, your morals probably come from that rather than the law. Especially like, there's things, I know like biblical things that are like talked about, but we define them as like illegal. And I know there's certain instances of that. I mean, yeah, like it'll differ from population to population, demographic to demographic, but I'd say probably most people are morals to law. They get their morals first, and that's not dictated by law necessarily.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So thanks for answering that. This relationship is a really complicated one. There are lots of how it probably is right now versus how it should be, but that also comes with a lot of caveats of accounting for human nature, things like that. So for me personally, it's really interesting because I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I think that, granted, this goes for almost everything in the world, but I think that philosophy, whether people are aware of it or not, they have intuitions, and those things guide them. And intuitions are cultivated by their circumstances, their experiences, and their memories, which I personally believe that nobody can control, and I'll get into what that entails later. But to me, in a perfect world, your laws are a reflection of your society's morals, and in an even more perfect world, your morals are probably good, so your laws are in turn good. Now, you bring up... Oh, go ahead.
In the most perfect world possible, I don't know if perfect has a spectrum necessarily, but do laws even exist?
No,
okay,
they don't. But I mean, human nature, you accounted for it, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would actually call it circumstance. And I have a whole understanding of crime that I wanted to float by you. But I figured we'll start with this philosophy part first.
Okay.
So, and this is going to get either really deep or really broad, and I'm curious where it goes. What is good and bad to you?
Oh, geez.
Right and wrong. To you personally, in like a more moral kind of way, to the extent you're capable of putting it to words.
I guess in this sense, I'm a very selfish person. If I don't like it, it's bad. If I like it, it's good. And that like will probably go for most things. I mean, on a broader level, like what's good for society, what's bad for society, I mean, that probably depends a lot on where you fall, like politically. If you're more conservative, if you're more progressive, liberal, whatever you want to call it, you probably have different ideas of what is good for society, especially when it comes to the government, et cetera. I mean, my own personal beliefs probably align less with the progressive side, more the moderately liberal side, I suppose, and again, in a political sense. So there's obviously differences when we get, further down the line, but is that like a satisfying answer? I mean,
no, this is actually very important for me because the people that I'm closest to, we're all a special kind of special, okay? And we all talk about like, these kinds of moral things, philosophical things more than the average person. And it's normal that you might not have like a firm grasp on like where morality comes from, especially when I wanted to comment on it earlier. This idea that laws influence morality is probably very real. If you're born into a society where murder is wrong, where stealing is wrong, then you're probably going to think it's wrong and grow up conditioned that it's wrong. But at the same time, there are other cases where I think everything that is considered bad could be okay in like terrible hypothetical circumstances. Right. So murder is wrong unless there's a very good reason for doing it.
Sure.
And I believe that there will always be a world where a very good reason for doing any kind of crime could exist. And it's hard for me to explain where that comes from because I also kind of struggle with, well, how do I feel about laws? How do I feel about morality? And it's kind of hard to discuss the morality part if people haven't thought too hard about it, which is normal. But I guess I'll just kind of put forth my own kind of grounding for my morality and see how you feel about that, if you agree with it or see it in yourself or anything. So for context, I was raised non-denominational Christian. When I was growing up, Jesus Christ, the GOAT, seemed to be a really cool guy, have a lot of what I perceive to be good things. And this is another example of your circumstances, be it law or the religion you grew up with, influencing your morality, right? And I thought Jesus was kind of cool, really cool, actually. Grew up with that, but then over the course of middle school, high school, I started questioning the merits of religiosity. And we can get into that either later or another day. But while the metaphysical, whatever you want to call it, groundings in like God and Jesus's moralities were dubious to me, I still found myself agreeing with the sentiments. Be kind to your neighbor, the golden rule, forgive with honesty. These are all things that I found myself agreeing with. But without that religious anchor, I started exploring for other reasons why I could have that intuition, even if I didn't believe in the grounding. And so I did a lot of thinking. For a while, I ended up being a moral nihilist. Nihilism is a scary, weird thing that has a lot of bad connotations. Same way you drop communism or atheists, when you hear nihilism, people freak out. But nihilism at its core, and it's kind of hard to define, but the way I understand it is based on the limitations to human perception, the things we can know, the things we can do, it's impossible for us to truly be certain of anything. And there are different categories of this. There's epistemic nihilism, which is actual true knowledge, and there's moral nihilism, which I subscribe to an extent, which is there are no possible groundings for morality, at least in an objective sense. And so I ended up there for a bit, but I still felt morals, right? I still felt like I wanted to be a good person, whatever that meant to me, happens to align with society. And I pretty recently, landed on a term that mirrors what I've been feeling, and I'm curious how you react to it. It's called emotivism. It's this idea of morals are actually just a reflection of a given emotional state. Okay. So if I believe something is good, I probably feel good when doing a good thing. Or if something is bad or wrong, I probably feel bad or wrong when I'm doing that thing. It's all rooted in emotions and feeling, and it's just a prescriptive thing we use to help us understand our heightened sense of existence, being humans, the only ones that can think the way we do, navigating, living in a society together. So that idea of moral emotivism, what do you think of that?
I guess it's not like similar to what I was saying, like if I like it, it's good. If I don't like it, it's bad. Is that kind of similar?
That is part of it. Are you familiar with hedonism?
No. Okay,
so hedonism is, and I know I say I study philosophy. I don't actually know that much about technical terms and stuff, but I know a few. In my understanding, hedonism is like your meaning of life should be to do everything in your power to like seek as much pleasure as possible.
Okay.
And that's like, 7 deadly sins levels of like eat all the food you want, get all the money you want. You are the priority and your feelings are the priority, but specifically through the framework of seeking pleasure. And while what you described on the surface might seem like that, I know that you're not like a selfish, terrible person. You're a really nice person. You care about other people. You're compassionate. And so hedonism doesn't align. You're right in that I think, and this is why I hold this position for myself, I think it applies to other people, is that moral emotivism is the fairest understanding of where our morality comes from without making assumptions that a God exists, or that doesn't fall into problems when you use like weird hypotheticals like the trolley problem.
Sure.
So yeah, that's how I feel about morality. Do you have any like thoughts in general after hearing that?
Yeah, I mean, like based off your definition, and again, like what you said, assuming there is no kind of God that dictates, our morals, I would probably agree. I mean, there's plenty of examples I could probably think of, like if you have an emotional response to someone getting murdered and that's not illegal, you're probably saying, hey, we should not let that happen to anyone else. Because of what I'm feeling inside, and I don't want that to happen to anyone else. I don't want anyone else to experience what I'm feeling right now. So that to me makes sense. And I'm curious if that really played a role, like back when organized civilizations weren't really a thing, and we were just like a bunch of Neanderthals running around and whatever. Like I assume we killed each other. Like did we just kind of emotionally collectively decide not to do that, or because we didn't have laws necessarily, it wasn't in writing, although nothing really was in writing. We shouldn't do this, otherwise you're evil or whatever. Did people just have that emotional response and just say like, hey, let's not do that anymore? Like I'm just really curious, kind of the history behind that as well. Along with its logic, because it makes sense to me. And I'm really curious if it's like historically backed up.
Yeah, I don't know which author or philosopher came up with the theory, but in thinking about it, I do still see a map of sorts, and it has something to do with the impacts of the world you grow up in. Like you were saying, laws influence morality to some extent. If you're born into a world where killing is okay, and you only care about the people closest to you, be it your tribe or your city-state or whatever it is, then you might not have as terrible of an emotional reaction to killing yourself. Not killing yourself,
right.
Killing space yourself. Wait, that makes no grammatical difference.
I understand what you're saying. I think there's a difference, though, between killing being not okay, killing being okay, and killing being just not punished. Those are very distinct in my mind. So, like, when you say killing is okay, does that mean it's encouraged necessarily? Or does that just mean it's, if you kill someone, nothing's going to necessarily happen to you?
You are willing to kill.
Okay.
Because if you weren't, then you wouldn't. I'd
say a lot of people are willing to kill for a number of things, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know. I guess where exactly are you going with this exactly?
Yeah. So basically, I think that if you factor in what we know about history and whatnot, it would come to make sense that morals are framed by emotional responses. Those emotional responses are framed by the society and culture and traditions they have at the time.
Sure.
So like if you're surrounded by death all the time, and like the Roman Colosseum, and like you're getting sieged by the Persians all the time, you're going to be desensitized to that, and your emotional responses might not be as strong. Even if you still have an intuition that this might be wrong, it's going to be a weaker intuition than I want to defend my Roman Empire, or I want to defend myself,
right.
Or things like this. And so I still think that this idea of morals being rooted in some kind of, emotional response stands, but it also neglects God existing, or whether or not some kind of moral framework can be developed that accounts for issues like the trolley problem or whatnot.
Right, yeah.
If you don't mind my asking, just for context, and you don't have to answer this, how do you feel about the existence of God?
I don't know. I float back and forth at times. I was actually raised Mormon, which is always fun to bring up. People always are a little surprised about that. I don't know. I mean, the more I learn, especially taking like biology classes, I don't know if I necessarily have an issue with the religion itself or the people that subscribe to it, and not even just specifically Mormonism, but like believing in a God in itself, because I find the things that they also believe in, I very, very heavily disagree with. So like, like evolution is a very common thing. Most religious people, at least on the spectrum that's like
more fundamental,
and like more creationist, I guess.
Yes.
It's like they don't think evolution is real, and I'm like, it's like one of the best backed up theories in all of science history, but
just a theory. No,
I hate when people say that.
I know.
So like there are certain things where I'm not sure if it's just religion in itself that I don't agree with, or if it's the people. and like the other things that they necessarily believe in. I mean, as far as the existence of a God, I have no idea.
That's the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I try to live my life in the sense of, you know, if whether or not my actions have consequences beyond, you know, death, I don't think that should matter, really. So I should just be doing what I think is right, whatever that means, at the time.
That's a really interesting perspective, because I took a very different route. I immediately separated like the world religions we see and experience today from just the philosophical concept of whether or not a God exists.
Right.
So that I could either confirm or deny like religious backings for anything at its core level. So like I said, I was raised Christian, and the whole time up through middle school, I was always like not inherently doubtful, but never fully committed, and I never really knew why, right? And I was just a kid. And then when I transferred from a public school into a Catholic private school, even though Christianity and Catholicism are rooted in the same deity, their traditions and stuff are very weird, and that cognitive dissonance of doing a different kind of religious ritual made me think quite a bit about, you know, how can one of these be right? How can my parents be telling me that both of these are right when they're obviously very different?
Right.
And eventually I landed on a surface level conclusion that I would flesh out through high school, that I was for a while just a hardcore atheist. I was like, these incongruencies don't make sense to me. And I was pretty convinced in that. But then I got a little more intellectually honest with myself. And where I stand today is philosophically, I'm an agnostic. Do you know what agnosticism is?
You don't know whether or not there is or is not?
You can't know.
Or can't know, okay.
But essentially, yes. It's like again, given the restraints of like, you know, human perception, what we can know, what we can experience, I don't think it's possible for us to know whether or not God exists. If God were to come down and give me a vision, that could theoretically be explained as like a hallucination or some kind of mental disorder. And I feel like, I imagine any kind of God speaking to human or me experience could be reasonably explained away, and so I'm going to say that I can't possibly know. However, in the real world, I practically call myself an atheist, because for the reasons I described earlier, I don't think that the religions in the world here have enough grounding for me to buy into the prospect that any of them are fully and truly real. It doesn't mean that a God can't exist. Like I said, I can't possibly know that. But so that whole development for myself is what kind of led me into this moral quandary of, okay, if God doesn't exist, I can't root morals in religion. What do I have to do?
Right.
And yeah, it's a very interesting.
Goes back to thinking is dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous. Thinking can think you into the abyss, and it also thought me out. So it's it's interesting how it works. But so that's like the moral aspect, I guess. And before we start jumping more into the law, what do you think morals looks like for other people, given, you know, your personal people you know, or what you've witnessed in society, the results of this election that ended last night? But what comes to mind? And I'm still listening, but I'm gonna go grab my water bottle.
Yeah, you're good. Given more of the world is religious than not, this is such a hard topic. And
More of the world has less religion than ever.
That is true, but an overwhelming majority of the population, the world population, is still religious. I mean, what is there, like less than 200 million people are atheist or other? I mean, I don't know. Like, when it comes to law, I think a lot of people, and there's a significant correlation with how educated they are, will go to their, you know, self-contrived, whatever their perceived morals are before the law, especially in a personal sense. So, like, I'm going to make so many people mad when I say this.
Uh-oh.
And I've said this before. I don't know if I've said this in front of you.
Maybe.
Like, when we're talking about the law and you brought up the election, like, I just sincerely believe if you vote for Trump, you are either uneducated or you stand heavily to gain from it, like you're rich or something.
Oh, no, I just fully agree with you. Although the only reason I don't put that forward is because it takes hours of like explaining in civics that the average American doesn't know for anybody to even believe you.
Which displays their uneducation.
But it's not their fault.
Well, no. God, no.
There's another aspect of my my belief system that relates to how I view crime that I want to get into in a bit. But Yeah, okay. So you're saying this idea of most of the world, especially most of America, is Christian or religious, and they probably derive at least some semblance of morals from that.
Particularly in like a selfish sense.
Sure, and I think a great example of that is abortion, right? The Conservative Party, which tends to be more Christian, values life, although I would need to do more research into the Bible. I just need to read the Bible, bite the bullet and read the Bible, so I have a better understanding of where they're coming from. But valuing life, at least in the modern conservative Christian movement, is very important, and because of the way they understand souls existing and whatnot, it is fair in their framework to, at times, consider abortion murder or bad, morally bad, when for somebody like me, I don't have that same grounding, and I have set everything up differently. It's very different. So when we have this kind of disparity, although it's not as bad today, but as you said, or I said, slowly but surely, atheism, secularism is rising. How do we come together in legislature to pass laws when we have differing moral stances? Is it even fair to cut corners on moral takes?
To me, it's not should we or, how can we? It's more of a will we? Because the answer to me is no. I don't think we would ever come together as an actual political society and just ignore religion. I mean, we're never going to get rid of the people that are drafting laws with the agenda of some sort of religion in their mind. I mean, that sort of branch of the conservative movement is never going to go away in my mind. So I largely just don't think that's ever really possible. But I'm curious if you disagree with me.
I do, but I'm going to lead you there.
Okay.
What would it take, hypothetically, if it was possible to pull the strings on the world, for that to become possible?
Well,
without going into actual political crimes. Which we are not for. Okay.
Well, not even that. I'll use the U.S. as an example.
Uh-oh.
If what Trump says he's going to do, he actually does, Democrats are going to win in 2028 by 500 electoral votes. They have no chance because, my God, things are not going to be good. So, using that example, I think we would have to have something truly just terrible happen as a result of their, using religion to create law or whatever to kind of make us wake up and realize, hey, we need to put a stop to this, and not brand religion in itself as an issue, but just say, hey, we need to have this separate. There's a very good reason it was separate in the first place. We need it to stay that way. So I think your average American is just so dense that you need tragedy to prove a point, which is very unfortunate.
How curious. That was not what I was looking for, but it leads in quite well. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what you described seems like a hypothetical event, a physical thing, some kind of catalyst to happen. Whereas I was trying to get more towards what abstract shift in understanding culture would have to happen. And now that shift that I'm thinking about could happen through the likes of a tragic event, which we don't want to happen, for the record. We may have lost the election. We are not hateful people.
Not even
we have morals.
Not even us causing an issue. It's just
yeah, society.
Yeah, I mean, just anything, really.
Yeah. Sorry, just to build on that real quick.
Yeah.
So what I had in mind was this idea of morals foundationally would need to shift. And it's going to be very difficult. It's not going to happen for a while, although things are slowly but surely turning in not necessarily good or bad ways. Things are changing, and change is probably good. But yeah, for me, this is why I always harken back to philosophy, because philosophy is the closest we can get to unifying our experiences. If we all get as closest as we can to understanding the way the world works, to understanding how we work, and other people have that understanding, then we have a foundational, unshakable unity amongst ourselves. And the opposite of that is demonstrated very clearly with Christians who hate atheists and atheists who hate Christians. That's part of why I don't call myself an atheist. granted, the other half is I'm not technically an atheist, but when you don't have that unity and there's a fundamental difference in the way you view the world, that's how chaos ensues, and we see that today. And that's why, again, I'll say it every damn podcast, this idea of education is huge to me, because I do genuinely believe that a lot of the realizations I've come to view as true are things that can be explained to people. But this election cycle made me doubt that a little bit. But I'm also not in a position to be teaching people right now, and a lot of people aren't.
I mean,
yeah.
A lot with what you're saying, like, it has to do with, like, how willing are people to actually entertain this idea. And I mean, like, if you compare, like, the difference between the most educated person and the least educated person is, like, very, very vast. So, like, what you're talking about, we would need just some sort of global, not even global necessarily, but for us, I guess, as Americans, national sort of enlightenment that, like, I just don't see as happening.
Or just a long, long time.
Well, I mean...
And that, of course, that sounds like a bad answer, because if it's too long, we'll be dead, and bad things will happen.
Sure.
But I still believe that the principle is true, even if it's on a time scale that wouldn't be especially meaningful to us.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's...
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's the same reason, astronomers, sure, are, like, concerned about meteors that are supposed to hit the Earth in, like, 1 million years or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Same principle.
I guess I can understand that. It's just, for me, that's kind of boring because, what do I stand to gain from that?
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
a very selfish person, so I don't know. I mean, yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I do want to say, being selfish isn't... I wouldn't call you, given what I know in our interactions, a selfish person. I feel like that word has a lot of bad connotations.
Sure.
And I like to think that you're pretty compassionate. I mean, you're doing this podcast, and I'll be upfront and honest, I enjoy this podcast. I like having a platform to yap. That's what people might call selfish to an extent. But I also genuinely believe and care in the prospect of, compassionately sharing my thoughts with people. And I genuinely think that good things can happen from that. And I think if you're here doing it now, you're not like doomering in the corner, right? There's probably something in you that's compassionate. So don't beat yourself up.
Well, yeah, and like when I say selfish, it's not like the full extent of what people think that word means. Like, and maybe this is an interesting avenue we could go down either at a later date or something. Like, I don't think altruism exists, so I just try to. Really, you think that's a hot take?
Well, you bring up a very important point. And this is why, like, when people hear me speak, this isn't me flexing. Okay, well, this is just true. But I use my words very specifically because, like, the reason I contested selfish there is because I know it has other negative connotations, and I don't want to risk you putting that to other people when that's not deserved of you. Altruism, I think it does exist, but maybe not in the same way we might conventionally imagine it does. It might not. It all goes back to moral emotivism for me. If like your friend is getting tortured and the option is like you die or he dies, it might be more emotionally gratifying to me in that moment to choose me to die than let my friend die, because my friend dying would be even more emotionally damaging to me in that moment. And that's kind of hard to wrap your head around, but just imagine, like, if you wanted to live more than watch your friend get tortured, you would.
Sure.
And so I imagine, at least through the moral framework, the reason that wouldn't happen is if you have an emotional state that supersedes your will to live, which would be some kind of altruism, but we can recontextualize it as an emotion of positivity, knowing that your friend would live. It's kind of a weird dynamic, but the same term.
Yeah, and I mean, is satisfying that emotional motive, is that a self-interest? I mean, like,
yes.
So then I would say that's not a selfless act. I don't know. It's such a weird concept, but like going back to the reason I say I'm a selfish person is because, again, I don't think anyone can be selfless. I don't see that as being possible. So I just try to say, like, what I'm doing, I'm like very upfront about it. What I'm doing for myself largely, like in most things I do. So like I don't try to convince people that like I'm a very like, what's the word? Jesus.
Altruistic?
No, not that. Not genuine. Like a giving person? I don't know.
No, that you actually bring up a very important point, and I realized I was doing something silly when I was just riding my high horse about words. When I was thinking of altruism, when you said it, I was thinking the societal understanding of what altruism is. But if we're talking the like definitional existence of the phenomenon, I entirely agree.
Okay. Yeah.
Based off of kind of moral emotivism, when I talked about. You will not do something unless you want to do it. Because if you didn't want to do it, you wouldn't do it. And if you wanted to do it, you would. It's just kind of the way wants work. So yeah, with that framework, on like a fundamental human nature level, yeah, we are all selfish. It's kind of how we live and seek what we want. But sometimes that selfishness ends up showing itself in compassionate ways, and it makes other people happy, and it's how society happens. Yeah. But okay. So I'm going to do a bit of a segue now. Now that we have a decent idea of at least my morals, you might have learned a little more about where yours might come from or how you feel about them. I want to look specifically at crime, this idea of crime. Okay. It's heavily politicized, moralized as normally being bad, morally bad. And crime is an interesting thing, but since you study law, and I don't know if you have to study any like sociology when doing that or not. But
haven't yet, no.
Okay. Well, just your intuitions then. Why do you think crime happens?
Ooh. Okay, well, establishing that a crime is, well, not even that a crime has occurred, but that someone is guilty of crime requires some sort of motive, right? In like any crime, particularly civil crimes, if I remember correctly. Well, not necessarily. So usually people have a reason for murdering someone. I mean, if you're just like a psychopath or whatever, well, then that's still a reason, actually. So, and I mean, that can obviously vary. Probably the reason crime happens, and if it's like crime committed against someone else, usually there's some sort of case where that person has wronged you in some way. If we want to talk about, something that's not necessarily that, so like, I don't know, take substance abuse, for example. Why does that happen? Well, there's a chemical reaction in your brain that, stimulates, hey, I just shot up, feels good, I'm going to do it again. That's, the basis of what addiction is. I guess, is there any other like examples you can think of that might be?
Well, literally every crime. I think you're setting the precedent quite well, and I'll just tell you, I agree, but I have a broader framework or belief. I think that crime, and this is all like philosophy, right? Okay, it stems from not having the opportunity to achieve something otherwise through legal means. So, and this can go for every crime if you think hard enough about it. The most easiest and simplest to understand is the concept of theft, right?
Sure.
If you don't have the money or the means to get something, more traditionally it'd be like food. That's kind of morally acceptable. If somebody doesn't have food, they're starving, they're going to be willing to steal the food because they can't do it through legal means. And you can even do this with other things, although you have to do some abstraction to understand it. Let's say that somebody steals a candy bar, and they have the money to pay for the candy bar, but they steal it anyways.
I was just thinking about the scenario.
Yeah, exactly.
That's hilarious.
Exactly. Now you might initially think, well, they have the means to achieve that. Why don't they do it legally? Well, the actual goal that person has might be broader. So let's say they see a way to keep their money and keep the candy bar, and they cannot achieve that goal through legal means, so they will steal and commit the crime to get the candy bar and keep their money. It just takes a matter of abstraction further out. And this even goes for the likes of like murder and mental disorders, right? So let's say I'm just a psychopath and I murder somebody. You might think, well, okay, that's just bad. That crime's not good. He just murdered a guy, right?
Right.
What possible reason could he have for doing that? Well, the reason would be maybe for this psychopath, killing is something that gives them that kind of chemical thing you're talking about with drugs. It gives them something, a feeling, a power that they cannot otherwise achieve through legal means given their circumstances.
Right.
And so they commit the crime. And so I believe that this kind of framework of crime happens because they can't achieve whatever they want through legal means, given their circumstances, is applicable to all crime.
Well, all crime, yes, but not all instances of people committing a crime, I would say. I mean, some people just commit crimes just for the sake of it, right?
Well, that would be the same example as the sociopath. They have some kind of psychological desire or goal that they can't achieve otherwise through legal means, so they commit the crime.
Okay.
I know it takes some abstraction.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's some like really outlier example I could maybe think of, but
yeah, and
okay.
this.
I mean, I'll agree with you. Yeah.
Sure, and I have There's another fundamental thing that contributes to my framework of crime, but I'm going to drop the question on you anyways, and you already know what it is. How do you feel about free will?
Oh, Jesus.
Because this has a big deal to do with, our prison system, our laws, what they're supposed to do, what we expect, that kind of thing. So I'm curious what you think.
I know there was the study that Stanford professor did, and I don't know, I haven't read it or anything, but like he found like free will might not exist, but it's like, how do you prove that? I mean,
I know of a similar study I can go into later, but just tell me what you intuitively think, or whether you've thought about it at all, whether you think it matters.
Like at some points I've thought about it. Like on my knee-jerk reaction is, yeah, obviously we have free will. I mean, like, but at the same time, can we truly comprehend something that's pushing us to act in a way? Like, there's just no way of logically understanding that, at least in my eyes. So, yeah, I guess my gut reaction would say, yeah, we have free will.
Sure. So believe it or not, I don't think we do.
Okay.
So there are 3 sects of philosophy that kind of tackle this free will question. There's one sect called hard determinists. I fall under this camp. I basically believe that every single thing that happens in the universe, with the exception of very, very, like, small micro level, like apparently there might be quantum randomness somewhere, but even then there's a counter for it. But I believe that every single thing in the universe is just a giant, insanely complicated domino/butterfly effect. So the things I say, the things I feel, the things I believe, the physical actions I take are all dictated by something that came before, and subsequently anything that happens was predetermined. There are examples I can go into this, but for the sake of getting through the crime stuff, I'll continue.
Okay, before you go, I gotta ask, have you ever seen Interstellar?
No, I know it's really good. I know I need to see it.
Because like that's like they use time dilation or whatever to go in the future and then like dictate.
Yes.
Yeah. So, anyways, that was just popped in my head because it's really fun to think about.
No, yeah, it's a great example.
Yeah.
There are 2 more. There's libertarianism, which is basically we have free will, and it kind of supersedes causally determinative natures of the world we live in. So like if I like do this, knock the water bottle over, it was inevitable that I was knocking that water bottle over because I had thought about it, and I pushed it over, and because I pushed it, it fell because gravity, whatever. Oh crap, I guessed. Can you bleep that?
I will.
Thank you. Okay. But the libertarian would say, well, okay, even though it's inevitable that the water bottle would fall over, I, from some unexplainable way, had the will that overcame all of my circumstances to decide to push that over.
Or what if I stopped you?
Then that would be your will imposing on mine, but they're both free.
Oh, okay.
But the third, which is kind of, this is going to sound mean, it's kind of silly. What's it called? I forgot the name. It starts with a C. Shoot, I should know this. But basically, it just agrees with the premises of hard determinism, but redefines free will as just acting in a way that makes you feel fulfilled, even though that kind of sidesteps the whole like metaphysical like free will problem. It just kind of recontextualizes it to be a little more emotionally satisfying for the human existence. And while I recognize the merits, it's just because it sidesteps philosophical like premises for me, I don't enjoy it. But those are the 3.
Sure.
And because I'm a hard determinist, there are lots of ramifications for that belief. And a big part of that is with crime.
Yeah.
So given what I previously talked about, where I think crime comes from, at least psychologically, I also believe that criminals could not have acted otherwise, just by the way the world works. And this free will discussion could go for a while, but I do have to leave for work somewhat soon. But I basically believe criminals could not have acted otherwise. And there's lots of weird ramifications for every other sector of the world. But with that framework, I believe that we should be a little more merciful to criminals because this idea of justice and retribution becomes unfair because they could not have chosen otherwise, and therefore it'd be unfair to punish them for that, at least to a rigorous retributory extent. I don't know if that's a word.
Something like that.
But my solution would be, well, okay, if people are products of their circumstances and they can't do otherwise, we should work towards cultivating circumstances where they're properly rehabilitated to the extent we can do it. And that's how we do that legislatively in the criminal system. I have zero idea. This is my fun thing, being a philosophy major. I have lots of very broad understandings, but when it comes to the real world, I don't know jack. That's why I go to this guy here.
Got a lot of great ideas, but man, they're never gonna happen.
Never gonna happen. But so yeah, how do you feel about crime legislation, retribution, rehabilitation in general?
I mean, like with what you're talking about, like the hard determinism. Did I get that
Yes.
right? It's like one of those things where you can't prove it, you can't disprove it. It's like what's the hypothetical? Is it like if a tree fell in the forest and no one was around, did it make any noise?
Exactly.
Or something like that. Like you can never know. And something interesting I thought about while we were discussing that is like we brought up emotions a little bit. Are we really in control of our emotions? Are we
No.
like just reacting to our emotions? Are we like, is our emotions more in control than us? Like that's a weird thing to really think about because then what do you say? What is us? So, I mean,
You're just walking into all of the realizations I've made over the past 2 years.
For any of this to have any sense of logic, and I'm a very logically minded person, you have to define what control means and, define what you yourself really are. Like, what is the self? God,
My young Padawan, you have a lot to learn. I can guide you.
I've never drank and I've never done drugs, but my God.
I came to all of this before I started that, so I was cooked ahead of time. But you bring up an important point, though. What does it mean to have a free will? The definition that I see floated in all circles is the ability to have acted otherwise.
Okay. Barring someone else interfering. So like when I said
yeah.
if you knocked down, if I would have stopped you, that's different.
If it starts raining and I don't have an umbrella, the water's going to hit me no matter what. But I can still act. Like another weird, interesting thing that I think works for whether or not you believe in free will is you can reasonably contextualize other people as just another aspect of circumstance in the same way that like the wind blows or like you look at the sun.
Right.
You can frame people as a circumstance, and so it still factors into whether or not I have free will to act around the circumstances.
Well, then whoever really is in control are POS.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess just how do you feel about crime? What can we do about it? Do morals impact it? I guess.
I mean, like the conclusion you arrived at is like we should probably provide the most optimal circumstances or environment where people can get what they want without having to commit crimes. I agree with that. How you got there, I don't know. But again, it goes back to the legal point: is will that ever happen?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing as like, will a utopia ever exist? No.
Yeah, that's
fun to think about. It's an entertaining thought. It's not going to happen. Yeah. Unfortunately.
It's an interesting realization I've made in every like political conversation I have with people who, even those who agree with me, but especially those who disagree with me, is I have to consistently hedge that even though I seem to have reached the same conclusions as a lot of the fellow lefties, my reasons for getting there are very unique and very specific. And I like to think they're strong, but they're different. And so I often get looped in with beliefs I don't personally hold, and it's kind of frustrating. But I do recognize that I am limited, and it's why I'm very thankful to have somebody like you sitting next to me who, over the course of this conversation, your orientation seems to be very physicalist, very events need to happen.
Right.
This is how things happen. And that's where I fail, and that's where I need people, and we need people that are different from us to look at things through our different ways, come to some realizations, and make plans happen.
Yeah, like I'm a very physically minded person, like objects and stuff, like the things that I can't see, the things that are going on up here, sometimes a little weird.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really do well with that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, that's where we complement each other very well for sure.
Yeah.
You have anything else?
I guess I'll just ask you for your concluding thoughts on, did you learn anything?
Well,
are we screwed? Are we cooked?
I was kind of going to ask you, like, what's the takeaway here? It's fun to think about, and it's an interesting exercise, but what's the bigger picture, right?
That's a great question. I get asked that a lot with my moral beliefs, with my hard determinist stance. We touched on it a little bit, but maybe this is a conversation for another day, this idea of whether or not a true self exists.
Sure.
these are all very complicated, abstract ideas that on the surface don't seem to change anything. So even if I don't believe free will exists, I still feel and act as if I do have free will, right?
Right.
So in the real world, seemingly nothing changes. But what I truly believe changes is the way in which I come to perceive everything moving forward after having made this realization that I believe to be logically true. So for instance, with criminals, my father's a police officer. Go check out that episode. Really interesting interview. But and I grew up thinking, well, my dad's fighting crime. Crime is bad. My dad's good. He raised me to be good. Crime is bad and we should probably stop it. But as I came to make this realization of, well, okay, maybe criminals can't really decide very much, if at all, to do crime, then I have to start thinking about how I view the world differently, my role in the world differently. And so I think the point of, philosophical endeavors, even though it might seem abstract or even stupid, is once you reach conclusions, they will change the way you perceive your life moving forward. And hopefully, I like to think in a better place if you're closer to the truth. And it goes for, getting people to advocate for prison reform or, more social nets to have people not commit crime as much because they're supported. But yeah, I think that's the key. And I guess you can ground it out to be a little more real with your conclusion.
Well, yeah, and I was just thinking, as many epiphanies as I've had during this conversation, and as much as I like to think I'm a smart person, I'm a very blank person. So and I'm about an hour. This is all gonna be out of here.
Yeah.
But again, it's fun to think about, and again, the conclusions we come to are very, very similar. It's just as you said, where you start and how you get along that path is very different. And that's all always valuable. I mean, each, whether or not you arrive at the same place, the path you take is very, very valuable. Yeah, that's just kind of my closing thoughts. Okay, so I guess, what does the audience stand to gain from this? Not stand to gain, but what's their takeaway?
Yeah.
And then I'll close this out.
I think you set me up very well. This idea of whether or not you agree with people, and this is the core idea of Discourse series. It's why I'm so passionate about it, because I realize that my conclusions I reach through very different means. But Logan's means, other people's means, even if they are fundamentally disagreeing, not saying you are, but they are important and they're valid to an extent, if not entirely valid, given what they had access to. And it's just this idea of recognizing that even what you perceive to be the most evil, worst people have reasons for believing what they believe. And if at the very least you can understand how they got there to prevent it in the future, or even fix it within themselves, show them how they got there and how it could be bad, that's how change is made, if it's made.
And there's even instances where you arrive at different conclusions but kind of travel the same path.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot to learn from things like that. So yeah, for sure, talk to people, learn from them. Our experiences, individual experiences, are so valuable. You have so much to learn from the people around you, for sure.
Well, yeah, I think that, again, I didn't really have too much of an outline, just the words law and morality, but I think we took it to a fun place.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Next episode will be Logan picking a topic. Hopefully that'll be happening soon.
We'll have something to talk about.
Yeah, we will have something to talk about. But yeah, just remember we have our on December 3rd, 6:30, Kiva Auditorium at the Student Union. It will be Logan and I debating two of our fellow interns, Riley and Jacob, over the topic of student protests. We're still fleshing out what it's going to look like, but that will be really fun. Logan and I will be on stage doing Oxford-style debate.
We're gonna win.
We might win. I will fight like hell. See the reference? But yeah, it's going to be fun. We'll have content on the YouTube, social medias, Instagram. And yeah, feel free to reach out, leave comments on your thoughts. We're happy to at least experience them and maybe have some discourse. But until next time, guys, thank you so much and goodbye.
Yeah, stay safe.
Please do. Please do.
Thank you, guys.
Goodbye.